Hello, it's me, your local non-binary witch, and here to talk to you about reclaiming pagan words. And this time it's the turn of theology. Now, some people like to re rejig that word to say theology, meaning of the goddess, or theology to make it plural. You can change it up however you want, but it is a pagan word. The word was coined in a book written in 49 CE by Cicero, and the book is De Natura Deorum, on the nature of the gods, and it was a polemic in defence of paganism against the upcoming rise of Christianity. So clearly a work of theology, in this case defensive theology, or apologetics as it's also known, but it is a pagan word. It's from the Greek, meaning logos, words or words about. In the words of the immortal Maureen Lipman, you got an ology. Because there are lots of other things that end in ology, like psychology, words about the psyche, biology, words about life. You get the idea. All derived from Greek, and theo meaning a god. Now, interestingly, although the word theo is gendered male, the Anglo-Saxon word god, Old English word God. We don't say Anglo-Saxon anymore, apparently. Anyway, that word God wasn't originally gendered. It acquired a gender later. However, theology, meaning discourse about gods, is clearly a pagan word. And whilst it may have been used in other settings since then, it's clearly our word. Now, the other thing that people like to say when the subject of pagan theology or theology is brought up is, oh, it'll only lead to dogma. Well, dogma is a completely different concept, and you have to actually have an organised religion in order to have dogma. And obviously, in order to have that, you kind of need a body that's going to enforce that dogma. And thankfully, we don't have that yet in paganism, and let's keep it that way. So theology is a discursive discipline, and there are many schools of thought in theology. Even Christian theology has multiple schools of thought. Now, originally, a school of thought was a heresis in ancient Greek, and that's where we get our word heresy. So far from being deviation from orthodoxy, a heresis was just a school of thought. But I digress from the main topic of theology, which, as I say, is a discursive discipline, which means we discuss stuff. And if you look at Jewish theology, for example, they really enjoy discussing stuff. That's what the yeshiva attached to the synagogue is for, so you can discuss theology. So this idea that theology will automatically lead to dogma seems very unlikely to me, because it is a very discursive practice. And what is more likely to lead to dogma is an unthinking approach to ritual and paganism in general. If you don't actually sit down and discuss and think about the underlying theories of your practice, then you're just going to accept the prevailing orthodoxy on whatever the topic at hand happens to be. For example, my favourite go-to example is the topic of gender in ritual. If we don't actually discuss concepts like, do the gods have gender? Do the gods care about gender? Do the gods perform gender in the same way as humans? clearly gods don't generally have biology, so like their sexual characteristics may be fluid. There are numerous instances of deities changing gender in mythology, so clearly you can have deities with multiple genders and multiple ways of performing gender. So we should talk about that and how that might be reflected in our rituals, and how the multiple genders of people can be reflected in our rituals and included. And if you don't discuss the theology because theology doesn't just relate to gods, right? Theology relates to our relationship with the gods and our relationship with religion. And if you're an atheist, it relates to your relationship to the universe or nature or whatever you work with. And maybe you wouldn't want to call it theology if you're an atheist, I guess. But it is wider than the concept of just talking about gods. It's about ethics and values and how we do ritual and that kind of stuff. So anyway, it's important to discuss the underlying theories of why we do what we do, because otherwise we will just repeat and reify the existing stuff that's out there. One of my favourite topics is light and darkness in paganism, which is completely different to how other religions tend to view light and darkness, because other religions tend to go, oh yes, the light conquers the darkness and subdues it. Whereas to me, paganism, and certainly witchcraft anyway, is about the marriage of light and darkness, so that they are complementary opposites, not in a fight. So this is important. They're just part of the eternal cycle of day and night, and that's a good thing, because we need night and darkness so that we can sleep and get refreshed and have nice dreams and sleep is good. So darkness is really important, and seeds germinate in the dark, so new life is made there, and that's good. So yeah, I think it's just really important to have a theology, to have theological discussions, and to articulate clearly what our theology is, so that we can have meaningful ritual and meaningful discussions about ritual. Because if you're just operating in a theological vacuum, you will end up repeating whatever the norms of the day happen to be, which is not necessarily what we want. So think on't, have a nice day, blessed be, see you next time.